The Democratic Party is in a very interesting place in this day and age in 2025, where they can't seem to motivate and connect with voters in a meaningful, substantial way, even in a time when President Donald Trump and his, by all means, absolutely disastrous presidency for lower and middle class people in this country is wreaking havoc on people's finances and people's general optimism and outlook for the next 4 years. And it points to really just a lack of a strategy that the Democrats have all been able to adopt in terms of standing up to Donald Trump's agenda. And I think that Pete Buttigieg here has a very, very good outlook in terms of where the party needs to go, what voters out there are asking for the Democratic Party to do for them to be excited to vote for the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates again. And it goes in line with not just this last election, but you can go all the way back to 2016 and even really further than that to point to a Democratic Party that has failed time and time again to step up and really fight for working class issues in a widespread and consistent enough way that makes an impact on legislation that is being implemented across this country. So we're going to go ahead and watch Pete Buttigieg here, and I'll pause it and have some comments throughout.
We are back with former Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, as promised, and we're going to talk about a lot of politics. So let me just start here. There's been, to state the obvious, a ton of conversations about the future of the Democratic Party. You've been about a part of a lot of them. I think this is a really healthy thing that's happening right now. And I wanted to read you something Senator Bernie Sanders said this week that I think you probably agree with, but I just wanted to talk to you more about it. He said, the American people, I think, not only want resistance to Trump, but I think they want what the Democratic Party in the last many years has not given them. And that is an agenda that speaks to the needs of the working class because it's not good enough. Now, you may not agree with all of that. We should talk about that. This sounds to me, though, a little, I'm old enough to remember when you ran for the chair of the DNC and you made kind of a similar point. You've been kind of saying something similar. So I guess, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, I think this is really correct. Look, we have got to make sure that our opposition and everything that we're against, and obviously there is a lot to be passionately against right now, but it has to travel with a clearer picture of what we are for. Because there are a lot of voters who, for whatever reason, and Democrats might be shocked by this, but for whatever reason, did not find any of the things they've seen so far about Donald Trump to be disqualifying. And what that means is there's something else that, it doesn't mean they necessarily loved him, but they need to see something more. This is not a question of accommodating things that we don't agree with or watering down or changing our values. It is a question of making very clear to everybody how your everyday life is different if we're in charge compared to if they're in charge. What your life could be like if wages went up the way that we propose that they be raised. What we would do with the money if we successfully stopped the tax cuts for the wealthy that are at the core of Donald Trump's economic agenda. What we think could happen in a country where we had paid family leave and some of the unfinished business of fixing our health care system. It's not just a matter of preserving the Affordable Care Act, as important as that is. It's going the next step to make sure everybody can get and afford health care. All of these things that need to happen, that needs to be as clear a picture as our response to the authoritarian tendencies of this administration. Because the truth is, proto-authoritarian governments don't just come out of nowhere. We would not be in this situation if the government, the economy, and the politics of our country were healthy. They've been unhealthy for a long time. I think everybody knows that. And if my party seems like it's calling for a return to the status quo from before, that will be both substantively wrong and politically it will fail.
Wow. Yeah. So it's this returning to the status quo, right? That's something that Democratic voters very much showed in the 2016 primary against Hillary Clinton that they did not want. American voters in general in the 2016 primary said, we've looked at the trajectory of the country and we've looked at the policies that both parties have gotten us so far. And they said, we want something different. We want the outsider, the guy who's unpredictable, and the guy who might shake things up, and the guy who hasn't been involved in Washington and politics for his whole life, because maybe he'll shake something up and maybe it'll be different for us. I mean, a lot of people were saying, no, Donald Trump is he's a part of the elite and he's going to do things that are favorable for the elite, and he's not actually for the plight of lower income Americans. But that didn't matter ultimately, because the overarching sentiment was that we want something different, right? And that's where Sanders and Trump, there's a kind of in the Venn diagram of what people want and what people like out of different politicians. You have Democrats and Republicans with a lot of things in the middle in terms of what they like in Trump and Sanders in the Venn diagram, right? In the middle would be they're both outsiders. They're both weren't a part of the history of the party. And I think that Buttigieg here is very, very accurately saying that if we were to just put up another status quo candidate, go back to the good old days where there was some sort of sense of bipartisanship, that's going to fail on its face very spectacularly. And what we need is a candidate who is saying populist things, but not only just saying populist things, but has a history of working towards implementing policy measures that are populist measures and benefit the lower and middle income Americans. And I think that candidate, that type of candidate, is someone who will have much, much more success in this day and age. And it's definitely something for the Democratic Party and voters out there to consider. Let's go ahead and keep playing this here.
The other part of that, there's been some, again, healthy debate about is, is it a policy question? Is it a messaging question? Is it a where you appear question? You've talked about all three of these. Let me just start with the policy question. Do you think the policies of the Democratic Party, the party you've been a part of, need to be more ambitious and bigger than what we've seen over the last couple of years?
In some ways, yes. Look, the fact that income inequality has grown under Republican and Democratic administrations tells us there's more that needs to be done there. And the fact that it is so hard to build and do things in this country, and I lived this when I was at the Department of Transportation. We got 20,000 infrastructure projects done, but we could have done more if it were easier to complete the things that we start in this country, and we could have done it more efficiently with our dollar. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there too. So yes, there are substantive policy things that we need to revisit for the simple reason that so many of the systems that we inherited, that we, meaning progressives, built after World War II, are now confronting a reality in what's coming up to be the second quarter of the 21st century that's just so different than the world we were in. But as ruthlessly as we need to leave behind anything that's not working, we need to relentlessly defend anything that is, whether we're talking about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or any of the other core commitments that make us who we are.
as a part of this, I mean, you've also talked a little bit about how we can't fight every battle. You can describe what you mean by this. And I agree with this. And I understand what you're saying. You have to prioritize what you're emphasizing publicly. I mean, a lot of what you just said to me was about domestic issues, things that impact people's lives who are just living day to day. What are the battles you think shouldn't be a part of the public fight that Democrats are fighting right now?
Well, look, I think the legal strategy is different from the political strategy. Both are important. So some of the most important setbacks and defeats of the Trump White House have been fighting it out on turf that maybe hasn't been as politically strong for us. Take USAID, which, by the way, to be clear, I passionately believe in the mission of USAID, and I believe that the right kind of development aid and foreign aid is both morally right and strategically smart. But look, I get that may not, there's a reason why they picked that as one of the first agencies to destroy, knowing that a lot of Americans are sitting at home saying, what does this have to do with me? But they also very clearly violated, at least in my opinion, violated a lot of laws when they did that. And some of the legal opposition that stood up in response to that demonstrated that he can, in fact, be stopped. So, look, a political strategy and a legal strategy aren't always the same thing. But what's really important about the legal work that's being done, the fights that are happening in the courts, whether it's on comfortable political ground or not, is that they establish that they can be stopped. And they establish when they're actually acting outside of the rule of law. Some of the free speech issues. Look, we may or may not disagree with an op-ed that a student writes or a protest, everything said at a protest that they attended. But what I know is that in this country, you should not be stuffed into a van or picked up off the street or thrown into detention because of an op-ed you wrote or a protest you showed up, ever. That's just a fundamental thing. And by the way, the libertarians and the conservatives should be in lockstep with progressives on this, that is just wrong.
No question about.
Wow. So, yeah, I think that's right as well, right? The courts are basically the last stand of American democracy at this point. And what we can do as Democrats is point to these court decisions that have been made time and time again against Trump's administration and highlight the illegality and unconstitutional nature of the Trump administration's actions, underscored by federal courts telling Donald Trump, no, you cannot send Kilmar Abrego Garcia to El Salvador with no due process whatsoever and throw away the key and not have any repercussions. No, you cannot have ICE agents be acting as your personal police in this country and bullying and intimidating people into submission. The courts are the last stand here. And of course, Donald Trump's administration, as Pete Buttigieg here, is aggressively going after the seeking to have new immigration policy be implemented, and they're going forward with this steamrolling ahead of getting people that they don't want, that they deem undesirable, out of the country, because that's like one of the only things that the American people at this point still marginally support the president on. But what we can do, we can point to what the courts are saying in Donald Trump's action against immigrants, and we can say, look at what these judges, these people who are, their whole job, their whole life, their whole livelihood is being nonpartisan and interpreting the law as it is written. And they're not siding with Donald Trump. They're not siding with Trump's blatantly unconstitutional actions that he has taken. And I think that is a line of attack that ultimately could be successful. It's just a matter of making sure that Trump's administration does not and is not able to completely break the system where they're allowed to just arrest and scoop up any judges that they don't like, making decisions that go against what the administration wants. And I think that if the American people can understand this battle that is unfolding between the federal courts in this country, even the Supreme Court, which issued a 9-0 decision that the Trump administration is to bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which the administration ultimately completely just ignored. That is something that the American people can understand is wrong and is a complete overreach of the power of the executive branch, and can perhaps propel voters to show up in the midterm elections and in 2028 to give power back to the party that is not blatantly violating the Constitution at each and every turn. That's all I got for you guys in this one. Thank you so much for watching. Like the video, subscribe, and take care. Have a good one.